Here we go. Big game breakdown. Brought to you by Intertops and Bet Online. Intertops Sportsbook, 22 years online. Sign up, deposit, and win. Just one game tonight in the association. Here we go, round two. Sixers on the road. Laying 3.5 and 207 the total. Celtics off the big Game 7 win at home against the Bucks. Sixers have been around hanging out with their feet up. Look at the series price. I know the injuries, but it's the 3 against the 2, and the Celtics have home court. Phillies minus 450. And it gets worse for Boston. Jaylen Brown with that hammy, doubtful. He's saying all the right things about he wants to give it a go. He was the #1 player in the first round in net rating. He was great for Boston, but he's doubtful in this one. So the news gets worse for Boston.
Sure, and the price reflecting the news getting worse for Boston. And yet, let's not forget, in round 1 against the Bucks, the Celtics consistently undervalued commodity. Here's Philly coming in fat and happy off a big series win. And here's the markets once again showing disrespect for Boston. Now, some of this is Jaylen Brown, no question. We averaged 17.9 in the first round against Milwaukee, and he's very, very questionable tonight. I would expect the number to bounce around before tip-off when his official status is announced. But when you start breaking down this, what do? The first thing we do is we take a look at the regular season meetings. And frankly, the regular season meetings, I chucked them out. They were all played before January 18th. Philly's a completely different team now than they were. Boston's a completely different team now than they were. And of course, you talk about the additions for Philadelphia since that time. 2 guys who impressed the hell out of me in the first round, Marco Bellinelli, Ersan Ilyasova. They combined for 27 points per game in the first round. Neither of those 2 veterans were on the team in early season. They were both trade deadline acquisitions. They've been huge for Philadelphia. They need to continue to be huge for Philly to win this series.
Well, let me tell you something. That last series was a coaching mismatch with Prunty against Stevens. And Milwaukee doesn't guard anybody, and they did a terrible job defending the 3 and guarding, period. And you saw with Bledsoe couldn't contain Rozier. Now you got Brett Brown, which, remember early in the season, they kept blowing big leads. That was a big problem. Well, no more. Because remember, they took out Miami in 5, never had the lead at halftime in the entire series, but ran them out in the second half of all the games. And out in the fourth quarter was the big story, too. Even game 2, the game they lost, they outscored Miami in the fourth quarter. So Stevens is terrific, probably the best in the NBA, but Brown's done an excellent job, too. Who's going to control and dictate tempo? In the playoffs, 76ers #1 in pace, Boston at the bottom, and in offensive efficiency in the playoffs, Celtics 10th, and Philly was 4th. And regular season, remember, the Celtics, even with the talent that they had in Kyrie, they were 18th in offensive efficiency, but they were the #1 defensive team during the regular season. When you get the big guy back in Embiid, will Boston be able to contain all these shooters that Philadelphia has and be able to stop Simmons from getting to the rim?
It's a big issue for the Celtics, no question. Again, you talked about it. This Boston team finished the regular season with the single best defensive rating in the NBA, the best defensive team in the league. 16 teams played in the first round, and Boston ranked 10th in defensive rating. So it's not exactly like the Celtics have carried that over into the postseason, and yet they were still covering numbers against the Bucks, and they still won the series despite those defensive issues. But when you look at the matchups here, I mean, there are some matchup problems for Boston. I don't really know how the Celtics are going to try to do this. 5 players averaged more than 16.5 points per game against the Heat. Redick, Saric, Belic, Covington, Ilyasova could all burn you off the bench. And in terms of the role players for Philly. And, of course, how are the Celtics going to guard Simmons and Embiid? There's going to be switching. There's going to be design changes. But does Boston go big? Does Horford go on Simmons and Baines come in and put the muscle on Embiid? Or do they keep Jaylen Brown in the lineup? Is he going to be good to go? And then put Horford on Embiid? I mean, it's a real question how Boston is going to defend. And where does Marcus Smart fit into the whole process? So it's a concern here for Boston, whose defense has not been good in the well, I shouldn't say hasn't been good. Hasn't been as good as it was in the regular season. In the postseason, and of course, a Philly team that, what have they won? 20 of their last 21. They've been a point spread machine during this span. And there's a whole lot of confidence. Rest versus rust. Philly hasn't played since Tuesday.
Yep.
Sometimes that's not a great thing. That being said, the Sixers are look at them. They're road chalk in Boston for game one, despite the fact this quote from Ilyasova stood out to me. Quote, when we were in Miami, the gym was half empty. When you go to Boston, you'll feel it. Even in the regular season, you know when you play that team, the arena is full, and they're really committed fans.
The problem, as we mentioned earlier, though, but right, in the regular season, early on, turnovers, fouls, and blowing big leads. They fixed that, although they had a lot of turnovers in that Miami series. But hey, what was it? Game 3, or game 4, they had 27 turnovers and still won the game. So they are the favorites at William Hill now to win the East, as their big series favorites in this second round matchup, which starts tonight.
Like the show? Help us keep the lights on. Please make sure to comment, share, and subscribe to all the Sportsbook Review videos. Thanks so much. Best of luck. Enjoy the game.